basically our top tips and tricks for issue identification and issue escalation. So if you are a Marketo Pro and you're in the system all the time, hopefully you'll be able to grab some useful tips and tricks from us today. So kicking on, so we rotate through our Blueprint X crew here in Australia on a regular basis. Today's panelists are myself, so Veronica Holmes. I am one of the consultants out of Melbourne, and I have with me today Steph Combe, who is one of our consultants previously out of Sydney, but currently sits in Maitland right now, proving that you can remotely consult from anywhere. But I've been in and around the Marketo community for a good decade, coming up on a decade and a half. And Steph has been in and around the Marketo world for a while, but from a slightly different angle, has come from to BPX via the Marketo Support team. So we're here, as I said, talking about troubleshooting. So I'm going to kick us off today. The upfront here is all about issue identification with your Marketo tools. So I'm going to say a few things that might seem like obvious, but sometimes when you're stuck, sometimes when you're really wanting to work through all of your issues, you can sometimes forget the basics of troubleshooting. So the whole idea here is to try to make sure that you breathe and remember your goal here, which is look at the outcome that you are expecting. So what result are you expecting in Marketo, and work backwards from there, step by step, until you find out where the fault is. The only way you can figure out where the fault is if you know exactly what you expect to happen step by step. We're going to go through the activity logs at the smart campaign level and at the person level, so you can see all the different places where we can access information. And then I'm going to wander into the Marketo Audit Trail and have a bit of a look there and the types of tools that you have available to you once you've pinpointed an issue. So the Audit Trail can help you find unexpected changes, who made them. And I hesitate to refer to Marketo Audit Trail as the whose throat do you choke tool, but product management, when they first introduced this tool to me, described it like that. But it's really about being able to see who has made changes in the system and has that impacted what it is that you are trying to do. So kicking this off, you cannot troubleshoot an issue you can't find. So that's a really important thing. Like, you can't fix something if you don't know why it's occurring. You have to figure out the why before you figure out how to fix it. And that's incredibly important that you don't skip that step, because getting a definitive idea of which campaign component is causing the issue and being able to describe it is part of what's going to help you to get help. So if you can't fix it yourself, being able to describe it, replicate it, describe the steps that you've taken in order to get where you've gotten is incredibly important. And finding the exact cause of the issue before you start to fix it is incredibly important, because let's just say that your form fill out is where your process is failing, and you spend all of your time in the smart campaign in the results tab that's not even going to show information about the form fill out, and you're trying to fix it there, and you kind of go, you haven't really nailed it down, so you can't fix it. So it's really important to not try to skip those steps. Think methodically through the troubleshooting process, much like you would think methodically through the automation process in the first place. So what I'm going to do is work through the process that I take to forensically check an issue. So this is when I've got a smart campaign where the result I'm expecting isn't happening. There's multiple steps, there's multiple assets. What is the process that I use to actually start to fix this problem? And the steps that I go through are define the issue. So examining the results, examining the activity logs, try to pinpoint it, going through the results metadata. So I'm going to look into a little bit of that today to show you what I mean. Checking the audit trail to verify your results, and checking your notifications to see if anything Marketo is trying to, if there's anything Marketo is trying to tell you is wrong. So you can't fix a sync issue if Marketo is having trouble syncing to something, and the notifications is where it'll try to tell you that. So it's really important that you work through all of these specific steps. Now I'm going to jump into Marketo now. So let's just say that I have a very simple kind of workflow that I'm trying to define. So someone is registering on a form for an event that I'm holding, and I want them to register for a specific stream for that event. So I'm holding a technical stream and I'm holding a functional stream. So when they fill out the form, I wanted them to, on this specific form, I wanted them to fill out that they are coming to the functional stream of my event. I also want to send them an email. I want to send them a webhook SMS to say thank you for signing up for this particular session, and I want to run a few other sort of small processes in the back end around acquisition and how I acquired this lead. So it's a very sort of simple workflow. But let's just say that when I ran a test in this particular scenario, what I noticed was that the person had signed up for the wrong stream, and so they signed up for the technical stream instead of the functional stream, and my webhook doesn't work. So the first thing I start to do is I start to go through the actual smart campaigns to figure out what's going wrong. So so if I start to go into my actual demo workflow, notice, okay, we'll check out the smart list, and I'm going to mention this a little bit later, but one of the things I always check when I'm dealing with smart lists is my any versus all filters, because it's so easy to get those wrong. But in this case, I've only got one filter, so I don't really have to worry about that. And I know that I got the form fill out, so it's not a trigger problem. So the person actually does have results here. But what I'm trying to do is figure out, of all the things in my flow here, what are the pieces that are going wrong? So I know that a value on my form has been incorrectly registered with Marketo, and I know that there seems to be an issue with the webhook. So the first thing I do is go through, okay, let's find the person who made the test, who made the form fill out. When I'm doing testing, I use add to list a lot at the top of my flow, because if I'm sending a test lead through, I hate having to go into like the members or into the lead database or something to actually find the person who went through the campaign. It's just very, very simple, especially when you're going through testing processes, just have an add to list thing, so I can just go into the list and go, okay, cool, this is the person who did the test. So so I know that the person came through the form and they filled out the form properly. So what I noticed when looking at the person though in the members tab, and I have a program member custom field on this particular form. So what I noticed when the person popped into here, when my test lead popped into here, was that they've actually registered for the technical stream. And that seemed really odd to me, because the form that I have actually has a hidden field on it that the event stream that they're signing up for is functional. And I can't figure out what it is why that particular test lead came through with the wrong value. So starting to work through this problem, this is the kind of the order that I'll go through. Check that you've got the person, check that they've got the fields that you're expecting, check that they're landing and coming through the trigger. But the next step is try to figure out what the results are. Now, the results tab in the Smart campaign will not give you the results, will not give you a log item on the trigger or filter that meant that for the smart list. Like how they got into this Smart campaign will not appear here as log items, but all of the different flow steps plus some peripheral things that someone might do. So if I send them an email as part of this and they get email as delivered, you will start to see those types of log items pop up here. So what we're doing is forensically going step by step through every flow step to try to figure out what is actually happening. So I know from my flow that I'm expecting them to be added to a list. They should have gone into a 20-second wait step. Then it should have sent them an email. Then it should have sent them my SMS via the webhook. And then it should have changed the data value for their acquisition program to show that they were acquired by this particular program. So if I work upwards from the bottom for this person, I can see that they were added to the list, and I saw that myself when I went into the list. That's great. Sent the email, and I went into my email and I was sent the email. But I never received the SMS. And I can see that this is a problem. So we've got demo webhook failed. So if I don't get enough information from the line out here, I go into the metadata for the particular log. So I can see that the URL that I'm using here, oh, that's fairly nonsensical, as you can see. So obviously that's my problem. The webhook couldn't execute for that specific URL. So that means that I need to go back to the webhook itself and fix the problem in the admin at the webhook level. So so it keeps giving me more and more information about the fault, the error type, and if the fault is at the endpoint that you're trying to execute to, it will give you 200 or 400 errors for webhooks. And you start to get used to where webhooks are concerned that 200 is good, 400 is bad. So so you start to get into the groove of figuring out what these error messages are starting to tell you. So I know that that's something that I have to deal with to get this working. So that's great. This first level has solved a problem for me. I can see that the acquisition is going. Here's something I didn't even know was a problem. There's change program status that I have that I had going in the program was skipping. I'm like, oh, that's right, because just the act of filling out the form and landing in the program, going through the smart campaign is going to move them to the first stage in the channel. So your first status in the channel. So by putting that change program status flow step in there, it was actually redundant. So I could actually remove that. So I've, as part of the troubleshooting, I've figured out a way to make this campaign more efficient. And the email was delivered, that's fine. But what's going on with that form? I just don't understand. So the next step that I go to is into the activity log itself. So let's have a look at the person and the type of activity that they have done. Now, the Marketo Activity Log shows absolutely everything. Everything this person has ever done, every value that's ever changed, every email status that they've ever gotten, every sync to Salesforce. And this can get massively long. I mean, this record here is my own in my own system, and it's 1,162 items long. So if you're looking for very specific things, so if you're looking for, say, change statuses in programs and things like that, then filtering down on the different things that you're looking for can sometimes help. So I've filtered out all of the noise, all the web pages, and all that kind of noise, and I've filtered down just to kind of the smart campaign actions here. So if I start to look through all of the different things that are going on, like, okay, I can actually see that that value has indeed changed event stream from null to technical. I'm like, why did it change why did it change it from null to technical? I don't understand. So if I start to click into the metadata here, go, okay, when that person filled out the form, they filled out the right form and it just dropped in an unexpected value. So I'm going to go out of this and try to get to my filled out form action. If I start to look through, where the person actually filled out the form, I go, all right. This is where you start to take notice of when things occurred. So the order that things happen can often be incredibly important when it comes to figuring out what's going on. So if something happened at 8:55 and something happens at 9:01, I can expect that the 9:01 action is dependent upon the things that happened at 8:55. And if something happened at 8:55, it can't possibly have known about a change that happened 5 minutes later. So you've got to be very careful when you're looking through these things. So like, okay, that value was updated at 8:55. If I go through the filled out form action, so sorry, that's not the right one. If I go through the filled out form action, I can actually see, based on this metadata, and you might have to spread your screen out a little bit, this is what came through the form when they first filled it out. So even if the data had changed later, I can see, okay, that's the API name of my event stream program member field. So, and again, here it's technical. So at the point of filling out the form, it hasn't changed to technical after coming in properly the first time. It was filled out with the wrong value. I go, okay, this is weird. So my form says it's supposed to be this value and this is happening. So in my head, I start to think, did somebody change the form? So you start to go, okay, what if what I'm looking at now is not what was in place when the actual action occurred? And so if you want to see if an asset or an underlying campaign or something like that was changed, you can't see that here. You can't see it on the person log, because this is where individual actions for a person are occurring. So you need to jump into something like the audit trail, especially the asset audit trail. Again, this is massive. This is like a massive log of everything that anyone's ever done and changed and done. And so a really good idea here is to start to narrow it down. So go, okay, I'm only interested in forms at this point in terms of my asset type. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to find forms and go apply. So now I can only see things that are going on with the form. So this is my simple form. This is the one that I care about. I go, oh, isn't that interesting? That form, so my record came through at 8:55, but I've got an edit on that form and a reapproval and another edit, another reapproval. I can't tell exactly what was edited on that form, but I know that the field details on that form were edited. So at this point, I'm reasonably certain that at the time that lead went through that form, it actually did say technical, and then I've changed it, or somebody else may have changed it. In this case, it was me. Somebody else might have changed that value without telling you, and now you're seeing a different result. So by going through sort of the 3 layers of troubleshooting, I can figure out what's happening at the campaign level, at the person level, and then at the overall audit trail level. So the audit trail, incredibly important tool. You can't really use it to figure out what's gone wrong in a campaign. Like it's not really a troubleshooting tool as such in terms of workflows, but it's a really great tool for knowing the when something occurred, especially if it was a change. And don't forget that you can also, in the admin audit trail, see if somebody has made a change to administrative settings. So for instance, if you send out an email and you're expecting the smart campaign limit to be 2,000 and it was changed to 1,000 and that was why your campaign failed, and you didn't know that the smart campaign limit had been lowered. So you could come here and you could say, oh, wait, on that date, the smart campaign limit was lowered. So, or the communication limits were changed. So you can see if an administrative change is kind of messing with your campaign. So it's really important to understand and to use the metadata underneath the log. So every single one of the log entries that you have is going to have an underlying metadata from interesting moments. You see here, this is a description of the interesting moment, when it occurred, the type and scoring. Underneath scoring, it's going to tell you the reason for the score change and the actual token that was used in the change. So every single one of these little steps has a whole bunch of detail underneath it that you need to dig into if you're going to really find the root cause of an issue. So the last thing I want to show you is that last point there. So checking the notifications. So the notifications tab is a very, and excuse me for all the people who've moved over to the new version of Marketo. We are on our demo system still in the old version, but the tabs are still up there and you can still get to them. But the notifications tab is going to show you all the types of things. So if I was having a sync error, if I was having a sync problem, I could come here and Marketo is actually telling me that, oh, the Salesforce server was not giving a response at that particular time. So, so that's why my sync failed. So it's really, really useful to come through these logs. You should, as a best practice, clean out these logs on a regular basis. If you're going, oh, wow, I haven't actually even looked at my notifications tab like ever. When you look at it, you're probably going to notice that there's like 400 or 500 notifications in there, and stuff like exhausted content is mixed up with sync errors, is mixed up with campaign idle trigger cleanups and all that kind of stuff. So if you keep on top of your notifications and subscribe to the ones that are actually useful to you, it's going to help you with your troubleshooting efforts over time. And cleaning up your notifications means you're not going to accidentally miss something that Marketo is trying to tell you that's really actually important. Now, couple of gotchas in this whole cleanup, in this whole forensic process. Beware the data retention rules. So what I just did, all well and good if the change happened in the last day or last 2 days or the last month. But if you're looking for a change and odd behavior and trying to forensically examine odd behavior from 4 months ago, there's a really good chance that some of these log items or the activity logs will no longer be there. So the ones that are retained for 25 months will still be in the activity stream. The ones that are only retained for 90 days, and that's a rolling 90 days from when the activity occurred. So things that are showing on the screen now, add to list, change score, just go all the way. The email delivered and send email were added to the list in August 2020. So there's a whole bunch of things here that you're not going to be able to see longer than 90 days. And what you'll find is when you're going through the activity log is you'll see some log items are there, but that critical change data value log item that you're looking for won't be there because it's one of the ones that's only retained for 90 days. So be very careful when you're troubleshooting. If you're going a long way back, you could be missing some vital pieces of information that you don't know that you're missing. So I've put the link down here in the recording, and when you get shared the information, there's a database, knowledge base article in the community that isn't on Marketo Docs, but it will show you the data retention, and it's a good idea to wrap your head around that. Otherwise, you'll get very frustrated looking for sent email notifications from 6 months ago. So let's talk about ghost errors. Sometimes you can absolutely swear you changed or deleted something, but the tree is showing otherwise. So you go, okay, cool. I'm trying to delete an email and I've removed all of its associations with the Smart campaign, with the program, with everywhere it's being used. And yet Marketo is still telling me your email is being used by these campaigns. I'm like, it's not. I removed it. I've removed all the program statuses. Why won't you let me get rid of a member in this program? Or I've removed all the tokens, but it's telling me I can't approve because there's a bad token in the email. There's a bunch of different things that you come across that, and they're extremely frustrating. And what we call them is ghosts. So in support terms, it's kind of like caching. And Marketo has so many connections with different things that when you change things in rapid succession, sometimes has a little bit of a difficult time catching up. So presumably you don't want to wait 48 hours for it to try to catch up. And I've seen people have issues with this where they freak out because half of their tree goes missing. And you're like, I just spent days building like 18 programs and now they're no longer in the tree, they're just gone. Don't panic, they are there. You just need to go to support. Support will run a refresh tree cache on your instance. They'll come back to you and you'll go there and voila, magically everything will have righted itself and everything will be fine. So support request tree to refresh the tree cache if you have ghosts in the machine. You should always have a list of like obvious things that you need to check, like little things. Like when you're in a hurry, sometimes you forget the littlest, simplest things. So always have a checklist where you go, okay, if I check this, if I check this, if I check this, if I check this, okay, all of these problems, then I'm not having a problem. Awesome. It's something bigger. But I hit these ones. These are my personal ones. I hit these ones all the time. You should have a list of things that you should always check when you're troubleshooting. So I've got a problem with people, you know, I'm running a smart list, I'm expecting 10,000 people, I'm getting 30,000. Oh, I'm using all versus any in my smart list advanced logic, because it's just one tiny little thing to switch and really easy to miss. So I go through, check that, make the switch, suddenly I'm getting the right amount of smart lists, people in the smart list. Checking your trigger. So doing form fill out, much like the example I just showed you. Did it work the first time but never worked again? Oh, accidentally left the smart campaign as being set to only allow people to go through the trigger, go through the smart campaign once. So when you're testing, you're going to change that to always rather than once, or you have to use a different email address each time. So so make sure that your smart campaign settings is not stopping your second and subsequent tests from going through. Not seeing something show up in the activity log. Sometimes if you've got duplicates in your system and you fill out a form, for instance, it may have updated a different person in the system that you're not expecting. So so if you do have duplicates in your system and you are having trouble with testing, you need to make sure that you understand that some things might be being sent to the wrong person. You're having web-based issues, you need to try it in a different browser, you need to go into Chrome incognito mode. Cookies themselves can mess with you when you're testing and troubleshooting. If you're filling out the same form over and over with different email addresses and it keeps updating the same person when you're trying to create separate people, yeah, your cookies are messing with you. So just keep that in mind when you're actually testing web-based issues. And tokens not working. I do this all the time. When I'm using my tokens, I just go in and take the default value out of my tokens because I just think it's neater. But I accidentally remove one of the curly brackets and suddenly my token's not working. You go through, go, okay, cool, this has one, should have two, check them all, make sure you don't panic before you've gone through and gone, oh, this is something I do all the time. So just know what you do, know what your personal bugbears are, and have a bit of a checklist that you go through as part of your troubleshooting to make sure you haven't overlooked things. Now, sometimes you just can't fix it. Full stop. That's the whole reason why Marketo Support exists. Something you've tested over and over again, still doesn't work. It worked before. There's nothing in the audit trail that's indicating a change. The notifications doesn't say it's bad. Marketo seems to be up. There's nothing in, but it's just not working. Bam, off to support. You've stared at the same thing with no luck for more than an hour. You've given it to a colleague. They've stared at it for an hour and no luck. You've reached out to Marketo community and searched on the community resources or different Slack groups or something like that. Nobody's heard of your issue. Bam, straight to support. Don't waste any more time on it. They're paid to help you with things like that. You've checked the Marketo docs and the documentation says it should work. You're testing yours, doesn't work. Bam, straight to support. And by the way, docs.marketo.com, bookmark it if you haven't already. It's your best friend. You get weird error messages, band-aid errors, legendary in Marketo. With the new interface, there's a few different kinds of network errors that can sometimes come up. They can sometimes be difficult to replicate exactly, so screenshot it when you get them. Just have it be part of your DNA. Whenever an error message comes up, bam, screenshot before you do anything else, just to make sure you've got it, and just keep the screenshot of the whole screen. Steph's going to tell you why. Or you see the ghosts that I was talking about. So those have to go to support. Do not bang your head against the same error for an immense amount of time. And don't be embarrassed or reticent about going to support. That's what they're actually there for. And on that note, I'm going to hand it to my colleague, Steph, who is going to talk to you exactly how you should work with support.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. So with our issue escalation tips and tricks, before I jump into the tips that I have for your, making your support case work for you, just thought I would quickly go in and double check that everyone does know how to get into our support. So from your main page, it should be either help or community. I think it might be under in the new UI. You will see this little dude looking a little bit like myself with headphones on, customer support. It will actually open up your nation, but you can navigate to support up here. And our case creation looks like this, where we have a bunch of suggested solutions. And I do believe that when you start to type in the subject, it can like load up more suggestions for you. It goes into priority and your case issue, as well as CCing. So if, say, for example, you're working with someone like us, and we need to be across the issue, but obviously we don't have access to your support portal, you can CC in. I will go into permissions, and this is also where you can attach anything to your case. But I just thought I would get that out of the way just so we know what we're looking at, and get a baseline of understanding. So a lot of people ask, what is the difference between like an authorized support contact and like your users in Marketo? Because you might find that when you go into customer support, it'll say you are not an authorized support contact. Please reach out to your support admin to be made one. That's because if everyone was allowed to make those changes in your Marketo instance, it would be a little bit chaotic. So the key is in the name. It is an authorized support contact. So your support contacts should be people who understand the differences between the decisions that they're making. So understanding that maybe when you're putting on, you're doing a cutover of SSL, you need to have just a short little blackout period just to make sure that like forms and landing pages don't do anything weird. Things like that. If everyone was able to do that, then you would kind of miss a little bit of communication and those important times. Case creation, we just had a quick look over that, and I will go into more bits about that. And it is important when you are creating your case to understand the priority of your issue. I understand that sometimes when you come across an issue, it can feel like everything's going wrong and you just want to put P1 and just get it dealt with as quickly as possible. But P1 is exclusively for a system down. So if you're having trouble logging into Marketo, or if you're noticing that your triggers aren't actually firing or emails aren't sending, if like a send sample is taking forever to get to you, or a live test of an email is taking forever to get to you, that is a core functionality that does require the P1. However, if it's just something that is affecting your business or your process, then it is a P2. Or support will still prioritize that accordingly. However, P1 is when the system is down and you cannot access it. P2 is for your own business impact. P3 is a functionality might be impacted, and oftentimes a P2 will be put down to a P3 if a workaround is found. So obviously, if we can find a way around the issue for now while we're looking into it, we can bring the priority down. And P4 are minor things. Mainly, it is a question or like even maybe like a setup, and it doesn't really have a functionality impact to your system. So now that we have that base, the 5 tips I have for you are getting your permissions right, getting your explanation down, which V has already taken you through a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about the importance of linking to examples, any supporting files, and I will be going into screenshots with a little bit more detail. So when I say permissions, I actually mean the case permissions. So you might remember that the support portal went through its own UI change about, I think it was over a year ago now, just over. And what used to happen was upon a case creation, that permission to access your instance was automatically linked into that case, unless of course you specifically said you did not want that permission to automatically do that. With the new UI change, that permission has been put into the customer's hands, which is great because if you have just a question and you don't really want people going into your instance for any reason, you can deny that permission. However, if you do need us to help or need support to help with your troubleshooting, so they need to access your instance, it's really important to make sure that you change that from denied to allowed. Otherwise, those first few interactions with your support engineer are going to be getting that written permission before they can even look at anything that you have explained to them.
Hey, Steph, we've got a question.
Yeah.
So we've got someone asking, if we don't know who our authorized support contacts are, what do we do?
That's a good question. If you know who your CSM is, so your customer support manager, they can often tell you. Otherwise, you can actually reach out to Marketo Cares and see if you can get them reaching out to your authorized support contact and actually CCing both of you onto the case to get that going. Because of course, you will need your support contact's admin permission to create a new support contact. I do believe that is just marketocares@adobe.com. I will double check on the spelling of that because I feel like that might abbreviate it to the MKTO, but that is something we can add. So you can either go to your customer success manager or marketocares@adobe.com, and Marketo Cares deals with anything to do with your support portal. So if your portal, if creating cases, if you're having trouble doing that, that's who you would reach out to, is Marketo Cares, because obviously if you're having trouble with the portal, you can't exactly reach out to support. So we need that secondary person in case you need to troubleshoot the portal.
Awesome.
Your explanation, so making sure you cut to the core. So showing or being able to explain the actual behavior as opposed to, being able to explain your expected behavior versus what is actually happening is going to be your pillars to your support case, the most important part. As V said, if you can't understand it and explain it to someone, then it's going to be hard troubleshooting it, and it's hard to pass on that understanding to someone else. So if you can make it 1 to 2 sentences and make it a nice, clear starting point for the support engineer, that it means that they're able to just jump right in and start running with your theory and look into it a little bit more, use some of their back-end tools. This can be as simple as, I expect this smart list campaign or program to be doing this. However, I'm getting this result instead, and I don't really know why. As Veronica said, you can lay out the steps you have taken so far. So if you have been writing that down or work charting it somewhere, this can all be added to the case, and it's helpful for us knowing that there's been a secondary testing. You can also put in what doc pages or nation articles, so those knowledge-based articles you have been looking over or following instructions from. Sometimes we do ask, they will just try and direct you towards articles, because obviously if you can find an answer in those articles, then no one has to be jumping in to instances anywhere, but letting them know that you've already looked there and you're still having the issue is a good idea. When you are giving us examples and allowing us to link towards them, that is the most helpful thing you can actually do. Sometimes when I was in support, I would get just names of programs or a name of email, and I would think to myself, I'm like, oh, I could probably find this. And I don't want to name and shame anyone, but sometimes you would log into an instance and the navigation tree would be a mile long, and you would suddenly start going into the folders, and there would be 5 or 6 subfolders within that. And it was just like, nope, I now need to go back and ask specifically where it is, because it would take me too long trying to find that. Even the search function can sometimes just lead you astray with that, or they'll give you the name that they've been referring to it amongst their team, and they don't actually give you the name that's in the navigation tree. If you're able to link us to it and we can just hit it and go straight there, then that's fantastic. It is important to note that the designer link, so once you are in an email and you say edit draft and it brings up that email editor, that URL link doesn't actually work. You'll notice that when that opens up, you're no longer in marketo.com, you are actually in marketodesigner.com. So to get to marketodesigner.com, you are using permissions, and you are getting a token from marketo.com with your login there. So you've already been authorized in Marketo, and that authorization passes on to designer. And unfortunately, that is very unique to your login. So designer links cannot be accessed by anyone else. And that's to protect your assets, to make sure that if you leave a link somewhere, no one's going to be able to go in and just take a look at your asset, at how it's looking at that moment. So I've just put up here a picture. When you have chosen the asset in your navigation tree, it fills out all the information and appends it to the URL, so you can just pass on to support the URL from your browser, and that should take them directly to the email. It also gives them a link, an indication of the email's ID, so 7116. Even before they jump towards the email, they can start looking at, with back-end tools using that that email identification code and start looking for little bits and pieces that may not show up in the UI, but is available to the support engineers. Supporting files. So if your issue pertains to anything to do with seed lists that you've used, or images, you have any logs or screenshots or videos, they're great to add to your case if they can help explain your issue, or even capture it, because I know sometimes that like a slowing down on network can be a little hard to replicate. So sometimes getting a video of that behavior is better than trying to get support on call and like show them, because support, we have that black magic, everything starts to work as soon as we're on your call. But if you are able to actually go into the portal and add them there, that's much better for the case, because oftentimes, it doesn't happen all the time, but if you are adding files via the email creation, those files can sometimes go through a little bit of a formatting issue. And then once again, it is a little bit of back and forth, just either reattaining those files or checking over to make sure that that formatting hasn't damaged that file in any way, and that the information is still showing correctly. You want to try and like limit those first few interactions with support to being about the troubleshooting rather than information gathering. So just below our access of permission is where we can attach files. As you can see, it's 25 megabytes, and it does support a lot of file types, so that's pretty good. When I say logs, some places or some CRMs can actually have, like Dynamics, can have a Marketo Activity Log and a Marketo Error Log. So if you are able to access those and add them to your case, that also helps, because then obviously with a CRM, that gives us a good idea of what the Dynamics side is saying the issue is, and we can like take the times and the error logs and cross check that with what Marketo is also saying in the back end. So, hopefully meeting in the middle, you figure out what the real issue is without having to set up too many screen shares and looking into Dynamics. And finally, our screenshot. So as we mentioned, the full picture is best. I know that it can hold some bookmarks and little bits of information that you might not want to pass on, but the full picture has a lot of indicative information that we can actually use that you might not actually know that support uses. So this might be a bit of background information that can be found in various places. So your URL can indicate a pod and instance. So even before jumping into your instance, we can they can look at any issues that are happening maybe on the pod or on the data center. Your time zone, so your date and time, can help filter down any error logs. So I know Band-Aid errors come up with like a timestamp, but if you're coming across any other errors, actually having the date and time helps the support, so they can jump into those error logs and actually filter down to that time, because error logs can get like just over a few minutes, can be extremely long, because it's just like getting all the little bits of information. But if we can filter down to the exact time, then it helps with support, like narrowing down and being able to gather more information that you don't have access to. So we know that sending bookmarks and other bits and pieces might feel a little embarrassing, or however it might be, if there's a bit of sensitive information pertaining to yourself, feel free to black out that part, or like just color in or blur it, whatever you need to do. But anything that pertains to Marketo and your computer system, so again, like time and browser and all that kind of stuff, please keep it in the screenshot, because you don't know what you don't know, and you wouldn't be reaching out to support if you did. If getting that full picture allows them to, pick up any extra information that might be surrounding your issue. So on that, we've just got a page of resources here. So your Adobe status page. When I was talking about your pod and data center, the status page can actually show you when Marketo is going through a bit of an outage or is experiencing an issue. So I'll go back to my example of triggers aren't firing. Oftentimes the process, or not oftentimes, but the process that does your trigger can falter in itself. So maybe your batch campaigns are going, but it is just your trigger campaigns that have slowed down. Things are coming through like a few hours later, or they're not coming through at all. Head over to Adobe status page, go through to Marketo Engage, and see if there are any issues. Otherwise, as Veronica said, if you're bashing your head against an issue and a few hours later you realize like, oh, status page says that like, yeah, trigger campaigns aren't working, that's 3 hours that I could have been like, figuring out a way around it, or been talking to support who might already have a workaround. So yeah, like just utilizing all of that information. Marketo Docs, bookmark it, because that is where you'll find all the information about the products and all of the different areas. It can take you through how to sync, how to do your integrations. Failing the docs, going on to Nation and looking at all of those knowledge base articles. You can also check out different blog places. So we often update our blog with tips and tricks and things that we've found. If you also want to get a little bit more technical and you want to dive into a little bit more developer, those of you who have been on Nation a lot, you'll obviously recognize Sanford's name, but his blog is a fantastic place to look if you're wondering about things like scripting and HTML. He's also just everywhere in Nation. Like, so if you're looking up a problem, most likely Sanford's got a like a comment trying to solve it for you, or trying to give you some kind of help. So yeah, Sanford's blog and looking out for his name in Nation is some other resources that you can be on the lookout for. Out of that, we are into question time.
Do we have any more questions that people want to just pop onto the chat?